On this episode of When Does It End podcast, we will focus on serving the HIV needs of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander populations across the United States. Chris, Tori, and Emerson will discuss the nuances of AANHPI sexual health and its relation to various layered identities we inhabit outside of just race. We'll have experts share how having a stronger understanding of our communities can help us address the unique challenges when accessing HIV services. And hopefully, we learn how to enhance our efforts under the Ending the HIV Epidemic initiative. We even talk about how marginalization can be a space to reimagine power and examine how kink, leather, and BDSM communities can serve as a model to help AANHPI peoples. So stay tuned for some fun, personal, and informative conversation.
What's up and welcome back. It's Chris, today, 1/3 of What Does It Take to End It? And today we have a special guest just for you. As you know, both Tori and I identify as Black. Blackity, black, to be more candid. And we typically discuss things from the perspectives of being Black within America. But in today's episode, we'll be talking with Emerson. Emerson is an evaluation specialist at the Asian and Pacific Islander American Health Forum who has interest in Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander health and sexuality. He is a self-proclaimed nerd for interrogating systems of power through sociologic frameworks, particularly in the subject of sex, leather, and kink. His perspective on ending HIV epidemic in America is a unique one. And today, we'll be learning more about him, his community, and what he feels should be done to end the HIV epidemic in America.
Thank you so much, Chris, and welcome, Emerson, and to all of our kin folks, our skin folks, and all folks. Today, not only do we have a special guest, but we have a special co-host, Emerson, who, as Chris just said, is a member of the Asian community. In our discussions and planning for today's podcast, Emerson dropped a lot of knowledge on both Chris and me. We learned quite a lot from him personally and also about the AAPI community, Asian American Pacific Islander community. I wanted to make sure that I say that correctly. It seems inappropriate really for Chris and me to take up so much space when we have a guest co-host like Emerson. So Emerson, tell the folks who you are, what you do, and where you do it. We're going to get to the nitty gritty later, but we're going to want to give them a little bone to chew on now. How about that?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Chris and Tori, for having me. I'm really honored and thrilled to be here with community leaders such as yourselves. To everyone out there, my name is Emerson. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I currently live in San Francisco, which sits on Ramaytush Ohlone lands. I am a first-generation Chinese American, and I am a gay man. I inhabit both identities fully, as well as many other identities, including being queer, working in public health, and being a yoga instructor. I received my master's in public health from San Francisco State University in May of 2020, where I really focused on identity formation of Asian American and Pacific Islander men within the constructs of Western narratives, and how those really lead to negative health behaviors and negative health outcomes, particularly when it comes to sex and sexuality. So while pursuing a topic like this may seem a little narcissistic because it's about me, it really comes from a place of not seeing myself and broader Asian Americans, Native Hawaiians, and Pacific Islander populations reflected in data. It also comes from a place of really not having these kind of conversations, even within our own communities, about the underlying fetishizations that are barriers to our community from accessing sexual health services. And really, I'm here to say that we're here and we matter and that our experiences are valid.
Baby, you better give the people something they can take home too, okay? And it's the intersectionality for me. I love that you represent so many communities. And often when it comes to talking about marginalization, the conversation always to be themed Black and white or gay and straight. Thank you for showing us that you can share different and multiple identities outside of what we traditionally view. I'm excited for the rest of this conversation and I'm eager to learn some more from you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that affirmation, Chris. The beauty of intersectionality is that we can be many different things and we are many different things. However, because our identities are so intertwined, it's hard to find the beauty in all of yourself when one or more of your identities is marginalized and devalued. And as a gay Asian American man, I've had my fair share of hurts and self-hate from having two sets of paradoxes set upon me. And the first is the inability to truly assimilate due to the model minority myth. And the second is the fetishization and desexualization of the Asian man. And that is to say, Asian American men are constructed as desexualized, submissive, more feminine, and especially in gay communities, a bottom. This makes it impossible for Asian Americans and Pacific Islander men to achieve perfect male status. And both sets of paradoxes are a result of multiple systems of oppression.
Your goodness, Emerson, you did not come to play with the kids today, did you? So I will certainly not play the oppression Olympics, but as a buxom Black transgender woman, I totally get it. So Maya Angelou states that we are more alike than we are unalike, and that is so true. Many of us have heard stories about the experiences of folks like you, Emerson. Some of us have even experienced those type of stories. Here in the US, there's actually a history of discrimination against AAPI people that only people of Asian descent can truly articulate. What I hope tonight is that our audience truly appreciates this discussion. You have such a diverse background, and Chris and I are really, really excited to hear more, and we're really honored to have you tonight.
Oh my God, thank you so much, Tori. And I love that quote from Maya Angelou. And if we could just see the similarities within ourselves and within other people, that solidarity would seem much more like an act of compassion and empathy rather than an act of showmanship. I mean, look at Malcolm X and Yuri Kochiyama. And you're right, there is history that I would love to touch upon in order to better understand this context of sexual and gendered racism. And so perhaps many of you already know that Federal Chinese Exclusion Act spanned half a century from 1882 to 1943. And that was really a result of a discourse that's created by white politicians, missionaries, physicians, and law enforcement. Chinese culture was demonized and viewed as a threat to productive and respectable American society. The entry of single Asian women into the state of California was actually criminalized in 1870 as Asian women were falsely associated with syphilis and prostitution, whether or not they were really sex workers. And this was followed federally by the Page Law in 1875, which prohibited the recruitment of laborers from the Orient and specifically forbade women for the purposes of prostitution. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 followed soon after. As a result, Chinese and other Asian male immigrants became trapped in what was called bachelor societies. Asian men were further isolated and pushed into occupations traditionally assigned to women, such as laundry workers, cooks, and tailors. The fluidity of gender roles and the deviation from the white nuclear family made it quite impossible for Asian men to assimilate to American culture. And one writer actually calls this queer domesticity, which I find actually quite beautiful.
Wow, you know what? I remember learning about the Chinese Exclusion Act in middle school, but never thought on the impact that it had on the sexuality and culture of Asian Americans. It's crazy how systematic oppression lingers even after laws have been changed. The phrase intergenerational trauma repeatedly ran through my mind as you were speaking. And for those of you who don't know what intergenerational trauma is that they are the psychological effects from the collective traumas experienced by people with a group for multiple generations. And with that being said, Emerson, in what ways have these past collective traumas you just mentioned affected Asian communities today as it relates to sex, safety, and pleasure?
Yeah, we absolutely see the effects of this now, Chris. In an attempt to reconcile and cope with stereotypes and that intergenerational trauma you mentioned, many gay Asian men have turned to really alarming trends. And these include internalizing toxic masculinity, race-based perceptions of the undesirability of other Asian men, and risky sexual practices due to large power discrepancies with white men. And these trends share the thread of how oppressive power structures influence one's identity formation, consciously or unconsciously. The resulting behaviors lead to a higher risk of HIV and STIs. Let me read you a quote from an ethnography by C. Winter Han called Geisha of a Different Kind. The quote describes an Asian man's experience with a white man. I know about safe sex. I've seen the ads, read the books, went to meetings. But he said he wouldn't do it unless it was bareback. He told me he wasn't really into Asians anyway, so it would be no big loss for him. But I thought that if I did what he wanted me to do, he would see me again. Who knows? I mean, how often does a guy like that actually want to have sex with someone like me?
Wow, that was deep. Thank you for sharing such inspiring words and such thought-provoking information and stories. If I'm correct, I remember you saying that because of intergenerational trauma, many queer Asians have developed coping mechanisms to deal with the cultural stressors of intersectionality. Could you briefly talk about sex and how HIV risk behaviors come into play within Asian communities? And when we talk about sex and HIV, it is common to hear the narratives of Black, queer, and Latin folk, but we rarely hear the perceptions of our Asian brothers and sisters.
From my experience and from the experience of other Asian Pacific Islander households, is that sex is just not really discussed unless it was in context of carrying the family name by having children. Intimate scenes on television or movies were always really uncomfortable to watch. I mean, I would feel so uncomfortable watching with my parents. I never had the birds and the bees talk. My sex education either came from school, the internet, but then luckily, mostly from the queer community.
How different do you think your sexual experiences would have been if sex was a common conversation in your home growing up?
Well, that's an interesting question because I don't know if I can even imagine my family talking about sex openly. But I would imagine that my image of sex and my image of myself would have been more realistic compared to what I saw through pornography. I would have also had a better understanding around HIV and STIs and not be bogged down by the stigma surrounding it. And I'm definitely grateful to have the queer community pave the way in sex education.
So now, knowing some of the things that you told us about the communities that you represent and merging those with the intent of our show, I would like to shift the conversation a bit. So the reason why we're here today is that we're talking about the Ending the HIV Epidemic and EHE Initiative Plan for America. And so what that plan is that it's a coordinated approach based off of 4 principles or 4 pillars that we like to call prevention, treatment, diagnosing, and response. And so all of these is a coordinated approach to reach 2 goals. 1, to see a 75% reduction in new HIV infections by the year 2025, and a 90% reduction in new HIV infections by the year 2030. And acknowledging everything that I've said, Emerson, today, how do you think that this information can be tailored or presented in ways that are meaningful to Asian communities?
I think that was good. All right, I think that's the wrap, just so we can go ahead and stop the recording.
What I can speak to is the relationship between power and sexuality. And the common thread there is that there's an imbalance of power dynamics. For example, Some gay Asian American men adopt the oppressive hierarchy and give up power to negotiate sex, sexual mates, and sexual positioning for the opportunity to find acceptance in mainstream culture and community. And that acceptance for many relies on the perception of white men being most desirable, both in the engagement of sexual intercourse and as a sexual partner. Studies have actually found that some gay Asian American men most attracted to whites share perceptions that racial categories really are an indicator of desirability, and that this perception is actually also associated with unprotected anal sex and HIV risk behavior. I think what's important though to remember on the other side is that gay Asian American men are really aware of this chronic oppression. They have not lost all agency, but rather than negotiate power dynamics, they end up negotiating with their own identity and health. The question then becomes, how do you harness and recast those power roles?
Ooh. All right, okay, so I get it, and that's fab. Thank you for bringing that into the conversation. And again, as a Black trans woman, I get it. One of the reasons that Black trans women and men, and also non-binary individuals, that we're at increased risk of HIV is often due to unequal power dynamics in our sexual relationships. And I'm not talking about the top versus bottom thing, but what I'm referring to is the fact that so many of us are having sex with people who simply don't see us as whole. They also see us as powerless, and when power and control are out of balance, it's really often a sign of an unhealthy relationship. And unhealthy relationships, as you just said, Emerson, using different words, they often lead to unhealthy sexual practices and making unhealthy choices. And I'm hoping that people notice I didn't even say anything about race yet. So here's something. So let's look at this from an intersectional approach also. I like to think of intersectionality as all of the different ways that we describe ourselves. So I'm a Black, plus size, woman, living in the South, transgender, natural hair wearing, and I could go on and on. And each of these different commas represents a different identity about me that people can discriminate against. You might be cool with fat chicks and BBWs, but you hate transgender women. You might be cool with the fact that I'm a plus fluffy sized lady. And you might even be cool with trans people, but you hate Black people. All right. Hell, you could even be a no fats, no femmes and be that person that's on every single site that says that. But the bottom line is each of us holds more than one identity. And then there's also this ridiculous notion that white is right. And I want to make this abundantly clear because a white man signs my check every 2 weeks. I'm cool with white people. I love white people. But white shouldn't always be the go-to. It should not be the standard for which we hold every other community and every group of people. Now think about it. You and I both hold degrees in public health. In public health systems, we refer to people, so white people as whites, and people of color as everybody else, which means everybody that ain't white. How full of bull is that? Right? It's true. And how you have to be, you think about it, you're going to have more problems in society the further you are away from that fake archetype of perfection. It's just going to happen. Chris and I have said it before, and we'll say it again. We, as people of color, that's everybody that's not white, we didn't create these oppressive systems, but we have to challenge them, and we have to live through them and survive through them. Those systems simply don't work for people like us and our intersectional identities.
Woo! Speak, Tori. This is why intersectionality matters. Because we don't just create identity out of that race and ethnic category, but from sexuality, gender, occupation, practices. And thus, when we are oppressed and marginalized, it's not just one aspect of our identity, but many. But I also think that marginality is where we find space to access power. And it's in those margins, perhaps, where the most creative forms of resistance and love and healing grow. An example of that is leather, kink, and BDSM culture.
So far we've talked about the past, highlighting the Asian sexuality struggles within a growing America, as well as some present day issues. Now, I would like us to take a look into the future. And as we talk about things such as operating within the margins and with reclaiming power within queer American Asian communities, what does that look like? What are the potential opportunities to blend new age forms of sexuality with HIV education?
Kink and leather hold such wonderful space to reimagine power scripts in sexual and social hierarchies, and to really reinterpret mainstream masculinity in ways that gay API communities haven't been able to do. The creation of a community-focused radical sexuality has been able to transgress Western discourse by seeing identity beyond sexuality, gender roles, and power roles, masculinity, to include actions, work, play. This has allowed for marginalized communities to thrive and result in acceptance, positive group and self-value, and safer sex practices. In fact, leather communities have actually had a long history of advocating and fundraising for HIV and AIDS during the epidemic in the 80s. These communities were one of the first to provide safe sex education when safe sex was not yet a conversation. And many leather title holders would fundraise for large HIV organizations or even for individuals who had passed from AIDS in order to fund their funerals.
That's really cool. Now, I haven't been to any leather parties, but I have been to a few circuit parties myself, and I have seen exactly what you're talking about. Many of these events are sponsored by HIV service organizations and typically offer HIV testing and local community resources aimed at ending HIV-related stigma and disparities within those same communities. Many of them even have hydration stations where water, lube, and condoms can be accessed for free in the midst of the event. Now, you talked a little bit about BDSM communities and leather and kink communities, and you sound like to me to be an expert. And if you are, can you tell us how you got involved within these communities?
Yeah, well, I am currently part of a process to join Onyx, BIPOC Leathermen's fraternity, really a legacy of incredible leather humans. As a gay Asian American man, the process has been incredibly healing in 3 specific ways. First, I've learned that entering a sexual situation or a scene, that people enter with the same power. We falsely associate positionality, top and bottom, with more or less power. But one can be a bottom when it comes to penetration and a top when it comes to impact play. A dominant position can still be vulnerable. We come as equals when it comes to the agency of our body. Second, because we enter with the same power, consent is how we create trust and safety. And to say it to the people in the back, consent is given and can be taken away at any time. Only through consent does it become sexy and pleasurable. What is important to remember is that just like the fluidity of identity, power dynamics are also fluid. So I have the power to negotiate and consent to sexual, gender, power identities, aftercare, and limitations. This is what makes kink and leather really radical. It reframes hierarchies that depend on identity as a whole. And third is really just finding a community that actively provides both social and emotional support and is not exclusionary based on socioeconomic background or racial desirability. It is the way that the community has established unique codes and practices around communication, self-determination, and trust that leads to an overall sense of self-confidence and a sense of value. One is seen as a whole being with all their intersectional identities. And as a result, many, including myself, are able to practice vocalizing my wants, my desires, and my limits, all of which lead to safer and more fulfilling sex.
Come on with it, Emerson. Now, I'm learning a whole bunch of different things today, and this is some good stuff. This is good tea, as we like to say. So I'll kind of reiterate three things that I just heard. One is that people enter relationships with the same power. So I'm not sure that I always agree with that, but I hear you. I do believe that in a lot of relationships, in some relationships, that is true. When I think about sex workers versus survival sex workers in particular, I think of there being an imbalance of power in the relationship and that folks don't have the same power. All right. When folks are engaging in the work merely to survive, there's often a loss of power and privilege simply based on lack. They need something. But you certainly gave me something to think about. So secondly, consent is about trust and safety. Now, without question, I wholeheartedly agree with that one. And that's not true, and not just true in the BDSM community, but I think in all healthy relationships that there's trust and safety. Whether it's your parents or parental figures or a brother or a sister or a romantic partner or even just a hookup partner, consent is about trust and safety. And third, what I heard you talk about was finding social support wherever you can. So I have a really good girlfriend, and her closest friend is someone that she used to get high with. They're both clean and sober now. They kept each other safe when they were using, and now they're actually accountability partners for each other in their sobriety journey. The support system that they created a long time ago has absolutely nothing to do with their social status, with their employment, with their education levels, or any of that stuff. It is simply based on mutual trust and safety, which is exactly what you just said. So, wow. So, Emerson and Chris, we've talked about so much already, and the truth is we actually still have guests. So is it okay if we transition from our three-person conversation to include our guests? All right, so we have an amazing panel tonight who are gonna share a bit about their lives and their views. They're gonna tell us who they are, what they do, and where they do it. So these are subject matter experts in their own lives, and we're thankful that they found some time to share with all of us tonight. So folks, welcome. Please tell everybody that's listening who you are, what you do, and where you do it.
Hi everyone, my name is Bill Lee from Los Angeles, California, and I work at APIAHF as a PrEP education specialist, working with Black men and educating them on PrEP education and also building communication skills.
Hi everyone, I am Cecilia Chang. My pronouns are she and hers. I am in San Francisco, California. I work for Transgender Law Center, and I founded a network of trans people living with HIV back in 2015 called Positively Trans. And I don't do direct services. I do advocacy and policy work and focusing on reducing stigmas and cultivating leaderships amongst trans people living with HIV.
Aloha, good evening. My name is Bianca Tasaka. I hail from the islands of Hawaii. I work at Malamapono Health Services here on the island of Kauai as a medical assistant phlebotomist. We do offer the gamut of HIV, STD, and HIV services, as well as case management, PEP services, and trans and women wellness. We also do outreach services as well as syringe exchange, and smoking cessation.
We know that Asian American and Pacific Islanders make up at least 6% of the total population in the US and its independent areas. And then Asian American and Pacific Islanders accounted for about 2% of new HIV diagnoses in 2018. How can gaining a deeper understanding of the Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander communities enhance our EHE efforts and help end the HIV epidemic in the US?
So coming from my background experience, working with Asian populations and just understanding the model minority myth and the theory that we have to do well and be good. And there is no idea of sex talk in our community, and the idea of just silencing our sexual identity in addition to just talking about sex within society is taboo. So bringing that within the Asian population and having discussions and discourse around HIV prevention within our community, I believe through education and prevention is key to stopping and ending the HIV epidemic, specifically with the Asian population.
Bianca, what are your thoughts?
Thank you for this space. As an Asian and Native Hawaiian individual, I definitely create space for my community and let them know that I am a part of this culture. And so I think having someone that is a part of that Asian culture or Native Hawaiian culture in your services or in your providing these services to the community makes a great deal for our population to come in to seek service. And I know that for a fact, as a trans individual, it's hard for me to seek services as is. But knowing that I take space in these places where health is much of a concern for all of us, and being there for that health navigation part of this process makes a big deal for our Native Hawaiian and Asian Pacific populations here. As in Hawaii, we are a melting pot. So we do have an influx of definitely Asian populations here. So I think also having verbiage and specific things for different cultures are great for them to understand. Thank you.
Cecilia, I know you have some tips for us from a perspective of policy, and I'm just dying to hear what you got to say.
Well, I really appreciate Bianca brought up the subject of culture, because to really understand, how HIV impact Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders, we have to recognize that we are not a homogeneous communities, and we are made up of so many different communities, and we have all these different country of origins, different cultural practice, and sometimes we have different languages as well. And on top of that, I think that it's really worth mentioning is that there is also a percentage of Asian Pacific Islanders here in the United States who are foreign students coming here to go to college, and I can tell you that happened once, before when I was doing some consulting work with Asian Pacific Islander Health Center, that they had somebody calling in and said that, we have a client who tested HIV positive, but he doesn't speak any English, he speaks Mandarin, can you be the interpreter for us? So that kind of situations already set up barriers, for folks to get linkage immediately. And not to mention that I think that Bill had also mentioned, we don't talk about sex, that's not part of our upbringing, my mom and dad, they didn't talk about sex, I didn't know where I came from growing up. And I think that, those are the things that those taboos are the things that we also have to overcome, becoming a sex positive culture, it's going to take time, unfortunately, of course, we know that HIV doesn't wait for you to catch up. And so, these conversations are really important. And especially we need to encourage parents to talk to, their kids more, about how to protect themselves. This is not a moral issue. This is really about a health issues and, and to really take good care of themselves. It's no different from like COVID-19 that you need to get vaccinated and wear a mask. So let's take the stigma off like HIV so that we can have frank conversations, like with our own community.
Emerson, would you like to lead us to our next point of conversation and focus?
Yeah, I would. I would also like to say that thank you so much for bringing all those points up. I think people often forget that AANHPI is not a racial category. It's more of a coalition building category. We are all part of this and we stand in solidarity with one another. But that doesn't mean we don't inhabit all our identities. We do in fact inhabit many different identities, many different ethnicities, and those are so specific to us. And I would love to hear, let's start with Bianca, then Cecilia, and then Bill. I would love to hear how our different subgroups of the AANHPI community that you work with experience HIV differently.
We've been having an influx of the Micronesian population here on island. And so what we've been having to try to navigate is interpreters, so we can they can understand the verbiage and the information that is needing to be passed on about susceptibility, about engagement, in ways to protect themselves and create a fluid health perspective in their life, as if they're gonna go and get checked up. It's like something that they can fluidly have in their lifestyle, where, if you're gonna go check up on yourself, you can do that too. It's a part of our health that we need to realize that no matter what culture we come from, there are languages that interpret these things for other cultures that better help understand them. So I think that's the number one thing, especially in Hawaii, because it's like a melting pot here. We have Asians, we have Polynesians, and when I mean Polynesians, I mean Tongans, Samoans, Tahitians, and there are words and verbiage that better describe these situations and things when people want to access, such as HIV education or testing and services, for them to better understand. Thank you.
Thank you, Bianca. Cecilia, I'd love to hear from you and your perspective working at the Transgender Law Center.
Okay, so I think that before I talked about Transgender Law Center, I think that it's really important, and Chris, you said it so much better than I do about representations. And I think that that's one of the building blocks, like in any community buildings and mobilizations, is we need to see ourselves in order to feel safe, to discuss about like what we are like encountering and our experience. So I'm not going to talk to my mom about like not knowing how to put the condoms on the men. I need to talk to somebody that's my peer, like around my age, that looks like me and talks like me, and so building those community, I think, is a number one priorities, like before we can even talk about HIV prevention messagings and and doing intervention. So that's a different challenge that we see. And that's what we are also advocating for, is to end data invisibilities. And because erasure is one kind of discrimination, because when we get erased, we don't get resources, and people kept thinking that we don't exist, so here I am, talking to you, but, on paper, I don't exist. So that's a big problem. And also, in addition to that, I think that this is where we need to build more solidarity across communities of colors, especially Black and Brown communities, because disproportionately impacted most by HIV. our Black community. So, and we need to really reach out, to our Black and Brown siblings, to make sure that we come up with strategies, to deal with this together, so until we can actually build a more powerful base, we have a lot of work that needs to be done. Otherwise, we won't be ending the epidemics amongst our community. It might end the epidemic for, the white community, I'm afraid to say, but for us, we need resources, and we need a lot of more resources, in order to achieve that.
Definitely beautifully said. The idea that representation is key, and understanding the model minority that we're good, right? We're all good. We don't need anything. We got all the resources. We don't need any help, right? So it's that idea that we do need resources. There are Asians that are poor, and there's Asians who are in poverty that aren't talked about. Those aren't the model minorities that everyone hears or has an image of. So it's definitely shifting it back to having an intercultural prevention strategy that will help all cultures and not leave the 2% behind.
I actually want to ask a question, and I want to direct it specifically to Bianca and to Bill, in part because of your roles. And you two both work in direct services. In a CDC study conducted in 2010, more than 40% of gay and bisexual AANHPI men had never been tested or had not been tested in the year prior to the study. And one of the most common reasons that they cited was because they simply didn't think they were at risk, in addition to all of the things that you pointed out, Chris. So what I'd like to hear first from Bill is, why is it that these guys are having this issue? What is risk? And is it different for a person of AANHPI descent? And then Bianca, let's also talk about the trans community, who are also Asian American, who are also Native Hawaiian, who are also Pacific Islander. And we also know that there are a number of different terms that folks use other than transgender as well. So let's hear a little bit about that. Why do folks feel they are on their risk? Aren't you all having sex?
I think, I may not be right, I may not be wrong, but it's the lack of information, the misinformation, the non-information, the non-conversations that are having. And so, with a lot of misinformation, a lot of not tailored information towards the Asian population, I think a lot of miscommunication happens. And one lie I've heard is that you can't get HIV, or that I'm protected, or that it's a one-time thing, it's fine. And so these are narratives and dialogues that people have and beliefs. And so it's that idea that with education and information, we can debunk these beliefs that they have and provide actual knowledge and truth based on information and science.
I'm going to be really honest. I do believe that as a mahuvahine in Hawaii, fa'afafine, akavaine, in different cultures, what's great is that we have a sisterhood. And with that sisterhood, we definitely let each other know about certain situations that may come arise for us. May it even be safe sex talk, relationship talk, because we don't have that people to talk to about those certain things. And I think when you have someone to talk to about these type of situations that might come up for them, I think it needs to be the right individual that understands and also can help them navigate through this, because I think that's another part of this, is not having that person to navigate them through this time. And I think that's vital when someone tries to seek out any type of service. May it be HIV education, may it be a common cold, or by fact, due to COVID, we're not at risk. I'm not having sex.
So you brought up something really interesting, and I'd love for Cecilia to tack on, thank you, Bianca, about the role of peers. All right. There is nothing like talking to somebody who gets it. And if I believe, all of us, I think, and each of us are saying it in different ways, the role of people who have lived experience in eradicating HIV and ending the HIV epidemic. You're onto something there, Bianca, and I appreciate that. So Cecilia, you talked about what you do, and you talked about Positively Trans and the work that you do at the Transgender Law Center. But I think folks really need to hear how important peers are, even when it comes to TASP, which you can also tell folks what that is as well. Because ending the HIV epidemic doesn't just mean that people who don't have HIV don't get it. It also means taking care of people who already have an HIV diagnosis.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I think that, a lot of times, like we really need to like unpack what stigma means, in our communities, and it actually impact, like our decision makings, in terms of accessing services. Like for transgender women, because we get lumped with like men who have sex with men so often that we tend to resist going to a HIV clinic that actually was in the middle of a gay neighborhood, or or is known to be a service provider catering MSM, and so because of this kind of set up, we feel discouraged. So, even if we go get tested, we are not going to follow through with linkages, because of the perceived risk. It's not necessarily real risk. So building a trusting relationship takes time. And it also, we need to see investment in our community. And I think the other things is we need to make sure that we really use the harm reduction approach to the entire HIV spectrum. It's not about taking medications every day either. It's about if you can reduce the risk that you have for yourself and reduce the risk you have in a sexual relationship, why not? So especially we now have the science to back that up. PrEP is something that is readily available that anyone could get from the providers, and so there's no reason why, we still have such high numbers of HIV infection, that's happening today. And the other things that I think that we need to also educate our community is that HIV is not a death sentence anymore. So often that, it's easy for us, and for us, I mean, I used to feel like I had to hide somewhere, feeling pity for myself because I got tested HIV positive before medication came out, but since medication came out, and it's totally manageable. So, but these are stories that we need our peers to tell us, that they would be the best witnesses to the advances and give testimonies that, we can follow on. And I also want to mention that, the other things that is really important is, we know that there is a high percentage of Asian and Pacific Islanders, gay men who use crystal meth. There was a large scale MSM study that had done, and they all reported that they have used crystal meth, prior to having sex. So, but that's not something that we talk on a daily basis. We don't sit together and say that let's come up with some strategies to protect ourselves when that happens. What can we do to help ourselves, remind ourselves that we need to protect ourselves? So maybe PrEP is the answer, maybe not, but we need to find ways to normalize these conversations.
Emerson is going to close this out.
Thank you, Tori and Chris, for having me co-host with you. It's been so fun. I hope we get to do it again. Thank you to our panel. Thank you, Bill Lee. Thank you, Bianca Tasaka. And thank you, Cecilia Chung. You matter, your work matters, and your knowledge has given us insight that will hopefully be translated into the work that we do for the communities and the communities we stand in solidarity with. I'll close out the way I close out my yoga classes then. May those who are lonely come out of their loneliness. May those who are suffering come out of their suffering. May what I do be of benefit to others, and together may we be free. Namaste.